Good morning and welcome to a work session for the Special Committee on the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. I am Representative Erica Leon, and I am now serving as the chairman of this committee. And I would like to welcome Representative David Love. He is a new member of this committee. So as we had our meeting last time, we heard lots of very, very compelling testimony. We heard people who went through a lot with their families and went through a very difficult process that was not helped by lack of transparency and not understanding what was going on. I think that this committee has great opportunities to make it so the process is better understood and also to find areas where we can help and we can help make it more clear what should happen, what shouldn't happen, and to make the process easier for people in DCYF, for the families interacting with them, and all the other people who are involved in this process. First, I want to speak about the administration of oaths. In RSA 1414, the legislature is allowed to administer oaths. There is no specific guidelines about how, when, where, or what is done with those oaths. However, there is RSA 641.1, which is for perjury. I do want to stop for a moment and say that Part 1, Article 30 of the New Hampshire Constitution protects the speech of legislators and not the public when they are in the chambers. So when you're testifying into a committee and you are the public, your speech is not protected from other courts and other bodies. I actually thought that it was. So it was quite enlightening for me to realize that that protection is only for legislators, because legislators need to be able to speak and not be afraid of the consequences outside of the consequences of this court, of the general court. In 2017, oaths were used in disciplinary hearings when that was going before the Legislative Ethics Committee. That was a matter of deciding whether to expel people or to take other action from members of the general court for what was said in the general court and what was done. Article 30 of the Part First of our Constitution says that the freedom of deliberation, speech, and debate in either house of the legislature is so essential to the rights of the people that it cannot be the foundation of any action, complaint, or prosecution in any other court or place whatsoever. But that means that your speech in the legislature can be an action within the general court. And that was a very straight line application of the oath. Now, moving to the idea of perjury. So perjury under RSA 641.1 provides for a Class B felony for false statements under oath or affirmation, which are false or inconsistent, unless the person believes the statement to be true. There's a little bit more into the statute, but I just wanted to sort of condense it down to my understanding of that so that we could have a better discussion about that process. So a Class B felony carries a sentence of up to 7 years of prison and up to a $4,000 fine. It's quite significant. With that, not only would you lose your freedom from that, you'd also lose your ability to have a firearm. You'd lose an opportunity to, I believe, work in the schools, lots and lots and lots of different things. Actually, the schools, I'm not certain, but I think I remember. I think I may or may not be remembering that on the qualifications for teachers. So given how serious those penalties are, it makes sense that there is a protection for statements that are believed to be true. Because if a person truly believes that what they're saying is true, then they shouldn't be spending 7 years in prison if they were wrong. That makes it very complicated to pursue and likely very costly, both for the state and for the individuals involved, to either bring a perjury charge or defend against a perjury charge. There's also the problem about whether or not it's equally applied. If perjury is unequally applied to certain viewpoints, then that becomes even more problematic and would have a chilling impact on speech. In order to get to that perjury charge, I believe that the Attorney General would need to bring charges, and given how complex and costly it is, it seems like it would be a challenge for that to happen, although in serious and significant cases, it definitely has that pathway. So right now we're looking at an issue where we want to make sure that people are truthful so that we know what's going on, and that is a lot of the intent of the oaths. But there's not a straight line path about exactly how it would be handled, even if you knew that somebody was saying something that was not true, was inconsistent, and that logically they should be able to tell the difference between the two. As legislators, we have to make a decision between that. And I think that there may be some parallels for that in the child abuse situations. We actually had what I found to be fascinating debate on the second bill of the calendar on last week on House Bill 1659. It really seemed to highlight the fact that child abuse allegations sort of hang around as allegations and aren't necessarily brought to a conclusion, whether to find that it's unfounded or to bring criminal charges. I've heard from people that if there's no broken bones, nothing will be done. And that's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. If we had a better process in place, we may not know Harmony Montgomery's name because that might have been taken care of. And families who have lost their children, parents who have been alienated and isolated from them, might not have lost their family. So if we as a committee are able to look at this and figure out a way to standardize practices and figure out a way to get more clarity, then I think that would benefit both those children who are abused and those families that are separated unnecessarily. I think that it draws an interesting parallel, but I think that that should be our highest priority. So my biggest part is I want to figure out how we can set guardrails. How can we have an innocent person be able to clear their name if there's no abuse, especially in those cases where we have that bill that's moved on to the Senate, where there's people who do make malicious reports. It happens from time to time, not all the time, but it does happen. How do you clear somebody when it's absolutely true that that other people witnessed the situation and it did not happen? If there's already a policy in place, that's great, and we have a place to start. And then what do we do when claims aren't forwarded to the court system? If there is something that is a felony because it's assault of a child under 13, that should not be kept within in my opinion, that should not be kept within the department. There needs to be a clear policy where that is forwarded through. Obviously, there's members here that have far more knowledge of this than I do, but when I was looking through the statutes, the district courts have the role of having a hearing and determining whether to forward on criminal charges to the superior courts. Perhaps there needs to be a policy in that. Perhaps there already is. But I would really love to hear from the members of this committee about their thoughts about this process and hopefully be able to inform me some, because we have some people with a lot of knowledge in child and family law and within this. Representative Weber?
Thank you, and I'm well aware that I have a small amount of knowledge, which is often a dangerous thing. It sounds to me, first of all, I agree with you that those are areas that I think could be looked at. And other people may have other priorities that we may also decide we want to look at, and maybe of higher priority, but the two that have been spoken of, I think it would be helpful for us to have people come and explain to us what the actual guidelines are that DCYF investigative workers are given for when a case is founded and when unfounded. And that may be something that folks from children and family law have already explored. And if we're breaking new ground, you can just give us the benefit of your knowledge. But I think that that's well worth exploring, because I think that this is the nub of one of the really most difficult aspects of this work. And you've already set out both sides of it. On the one side, you know, the process can be weaponized either by parents who are angry or divorced, or a neighbor who's angry at their neighbor or anybody else. And that's a very bad thing for the parent and the family as a whole. On the other hand, we certainly want to be sure that actual cases of abuse are investigated and followed up on. And, you know, one of the things that I'm remembering, and I don't know exactly where it sits now, but from my last service on a committee with a similar charge, was the issue of, can an investigative worker go into the home and under what circumstances, and how thoroughly they can look at that. And on the one hand, we have the protections of the family and the home, and on the other hand, we have the protection of the child. So I'd love to hear more about the current state of affairs and what people think they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. So I think that's very much worthy of looking at. And then I think that figuring out the referral process, because as we know, everybody in the state is a mandated reporter. So if I suspect abuse, I am required, even though just a private citizen, to report that to DCYF. And I know that in many cases, DCYF makes a referral uh, to the police department for criminal investigation, because that's where the criminal charges are investigated, and to a state's attorney for prosecution. So I think understanding that process better would also be very useful for us as a starting point. And I would think that perhaps at our next meeting we could ask for people to come and help us with that.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think we also might want to have the chiefs of police come and speak about how they handle those referrals, because we don't know if the handoff is has everything it needs. Um, yes, Representative Gregg.
Sorry, I turned my name tag back around. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So one thing that, I want to balance out the fact that I know we want the truth or what people think of the truth. One of the things in looking at cases of abuse is what people think is abuse. I will say, as far as how other states compare and New Hampshire compares, our definitions of abuse are decades behind where other places are. And a lot of times when you talk to someone who has been accused of abuse, or even you see court cases or anything like that, what you'll notice is a common lack of insight. So what I look at and say, gosh, that kid has a bruise on his face, that's abuse. An abuser might say, he was smart enough to me and it's my job to teach him a lesson. So there's a break in what is appropriate and what is abuse. So that's one of those hard things when I look at administering an oath. I mean, it's our job to ask the questions, to listen to what somebody wants to say, and then also to talk to people that have knowledge of particular things, because what is one person's perception is somebody else's very different perception. And we get that a lot in child and family law, because we do see a lot of abuse and that stuff. But there is a hallmark in abusers, and there are two actually. One, an abuser will oftentimes say they've been abused, and also a lack of insight into their own behavior being abused. So those are two things to keep in mind as we look at this.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's the cycle of abuse, and we need to figure out how to break it, right? Representative Kofalt.
Thank you. I think related to some of the topics that you mentioned, Madam Chair, there is the bill that we just sent over to the other body regarding false reports. I am also concerned that a smart person who wants to file false reports will perhaps not file false reports directly, but will speak to a mandated reporter. And I've actually heard of instances of this happening repeatedly, and DCYF doing what I think is appropriate under the circumstances, which is investigating those over and over again. Finding no fault over and over again. Nevertheless, I think it is consuming DCYF resources, and I'm not sure what the solution to that is, but it does seem to me that it's something that ought to be within the purview of this committee as well.
Thank you. Representative Panic.
Thank you, Chairman. I heard that 90% of the abuse reports are false allegations. How do we tease that out? And the judges know that 90% of the abuse allegations are there, but in order to protect that 10% that it's where there's real abuse, it seems to me like everybody is paying the price, how do we assure that this isn't going to continue to happen? And I speak from experience of a false allegation that was given about my son, and I was there, and what was alleged never happened, and it cost a lot of money to clean that up. And the judge even said they know, but they just have to be absolutely certain to protect that other 10%. What can we do to protect the innocent?
And can I just interject one
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
I was going to ask a question, but.
Well, I just want to be sure that we are understanding the difference between a false report, which is materially false, as in your case, and an unfounded report, which is a report where they simply cannot document what happened. So I just want all of us to keep that firmly in mind, and I'm sorry for the interruption.
And that's precisely what I was about to ask. Do you know if if it's that 90% are false, or if only 10% are found to have abuse? If you don't know the number, that's
I
fine.
don't know.
Okay.
I don't have the answer
I-
to that.
I think a lot of that is that big area in between the known and on either end. Representative Gregg and then Representative Grossman.
And there's actually different levels of findings. So it's not just black or white. It's not just, well, this is unfounded, this is founded, this is false even. There are very different levels. And I think that's going to be really imperative to have somebody from actually DCYF come in and talk to us about that, what levels they have. And I know that on here you even have like how an innocent person can clear their name. There are certain things when there's certain levels of findings, it's not really a registry, it just is in that DCYF file. So if something comes up again, they're looking for a pattern. Like okay, it might not necessarily be founded, like somebody's been pinching their child for punishment and leaving bruises. So okay, now they're going to come back and they're going to tell that parent that's not appropriate parenting. Now, if it happens again, it's still in the file, so they can see this has come up before, and that helps. But there are levels of findings. It's not just one way or the other. So it's what they can prosecute is what I think was that 10% that can, but there are levels. So
Thank you. That's helpful. And I definitely want us to learn more about that. Same question, Representative Grossman. Representative Love.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Representative Gregg hit on something when she was talking about just what is child abuse. In some states, you can whack your kid in the head. Other states you can't. I think we have to define that. And punching a child to me is a felony. They should do a long stretch of time. And if we had something like that, how many would be alive today? Also. Representative, and I'm going to turn your name, Weber. That's it. Yes. She also mentioned the policies. I want to see the policy playbook because in my experiences, it's all over the place. It changes, and I'm one of the ones that had that no broken bones, no hospitalization. There isn't much we can do. I had that happen twice. There were knuckle marks on my daughter's back.
Representative Love, let's make sure that we keep our role on the committee
Yes.
separate from our personal experiences. And with the personal experiences, whether it's professional or personal, a brief mention is good to know where we are. But the more that we get into it, I'd like to separate it out so that we can make sure that we're keeping clear boundaries and lines.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that that there was evidence and nothing was done. It was unfounded, I was told, and that's being told to people. I had a woman tell me that a month ago. So we've got to clearly define what is actual child abuse and what isn't.
Thank you. Representative Grossman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to piggyback along what Representative Love was saying, the definition of what founded in New Hampshire and what unfounded, we'd be remiss to not mention parental rights and the issue that parental rights have in this right now, because Harmony Montgomery was not protected because of parental rights. That level is not founded. So the laws need to change if we want to protect children in those ways. That's up to the general court to decide. But
Yeah, that's why I'm saying.
Okay.
We need to have.
Uh, Thank you. And this information is that sometimes there are concurrent cases going on, one within DCYF and one within the criminal courts. So this is a lot that, I need to learn, other people need to learn. And the more that we can discuss this and people can understand what the processes are, I think the better, because there'll be fewer misunderstandings. Representative Weber?
And if we want to go further into the layers of complexity, a child who is the subject of an abuse and neglect petition under the DCYF statutes may also themselves be the subject of a juvenile prosecution for something the child has done. So that interjects a JPPO, Juvenile Probation Parole Officer. I never remember what all the P's stand for, but it's Juvenile Probation Officer into the mix. So these are really complicated cases, and I applaud your clarity in reminding all of us that we have to keep firmly in mind, not only between personal and our roles here, but also all the various roles that come into play, and they're all in the family court. But my personal opinion is that divorces are not in our purview in this committee, except perhaps as DCYF is sometimes weaponized in a divorce case, which then does become the purview of this committee. So I think all of us are going to have to work really hard at being very clear about which aspect of which problem we're talking about at any time, because God knows there are enough problems to go around. But the more clarity we have, the better we can do at addressing them.
Yes, thank you. That is a very good point. And this committee also is not focused on the family courts. It's focused on DCYF. I believe that in this focus and getting more clarity, it's a matter of what feeds into the other systems. Because if there is a process in order to, I guess it's a matter of just understanding the process is best so that we can make sure that everybody's rights are protected through in this. And I apologize that I didn't catch everything, Representative Grossman, on that. It was basically just that you're concerned that parents' rights put children at risk, sort of, or no, sorry.
Just the concern that right now the big debate in New Hampshire and across the country as well, but the whole parental rights versus the rights of the child, and unfounded findings in many cases are situations where there are signs of hitting, slapping, but it's not founded by the level that the law in New Hampshire calls for. And so the pushback to that are parental rights, because folks want to maintain their rights, and versus that's giving children more rights to protect them.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of that comes down to the rights, and you never have the right to harm any person unless it is in direct self-defense. And then that is only in order to stop the harm that is being done. And as I was looking at the statutes, assault of a child under 13 is treated differently, which I don't know what the thoughts were going into that, but it's a lot less likely that you're in an actual back and forth physical situation with somebody under 13 than you are maybe a 15-year-old child who is stronger than the parents and knows that they know more than the parents, because that's what being 15 is, right? Representative Weber?
I will just say that the definition of abuse is in the statute, and sorry, I moved down. Abused child means any child who has been sexually abused, intentionally physically injured, which does not have the more nuanced discussions that we've been having, which is why we need to understand more about how this is applied. Psychologically injured, so that the child exhibits symptoms of emotional problems. Physically injured by other than accidental means or subjected by any human trafficking, or subjected to an act prohibited by RSA 632A10D, and I have no idea what that is, but I'm sure it's terrible. But I think that, you know, I have some knowledge of how the statute evolved, at least sort of 10 years ago when we were looking at this, because when we started then, if you want to talk about antiquated, at that point, under 169C2, the purpose, the highest purpose was the preservation of the family unit, and that was the highest purpose over everything. And we are all certainly very much, I'm sure, in favor of preserving a family unit, but only when it can be done safely. And the fight to get the highest purpose to be protect the safety of the child was even then very controversial. And determining, it's now written, determining if the preservation of the family unit is in the best interest of the child. And of course, it really very often is, and that's what we should be working for. So these things change, they're in flux, and they have been in flux, you know, forever. But I think taking a good look at whether they completely reflect what we think of societal values today is important. And the other thing is that, you know, we also have to take into account the fact that my societal values and the values of everybody else in this room are probably somewhat different. Having been spanked regularly as a child and been proud of it, but only when I knew it was coming and chose not to stop doing whatever I'd been told not to do. And that was a different time and a different way of looking at things. And it was only with the flat of the hand on a clad bottom. So, you know, all of those things make a difference. And societally, you know, we are now a nation where there are an awful lot of different kind of cultural references.
Representative Gregg?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So one of the things that in coming into this special committee, and I hope this is okay to say what my hopes for was, in looking at this, I think that there are certainly, we've seen both ends of the spectrum, because that's what you hear about the most, not the, you know, the kind of the middle and what the norm is. And I think we can all get ideas, you know, whether or not you've looked at the Harmony Montgomery case and said, why did they not do more? Or, you know, someone that has been estranged from their kids and why didn't they do more? But like to check that bias at the door and just really listen. And I think it would be really helpful to get DCYF in here, not under the precursor that they're going to be in a tribunal, but let's find out, like, what are their mandates? What does it take for them to intervene? Are there certain levels? What does their follow-up look? I'd really like to have one session where we have them in here and we can ask them these questions and ask procedurally what they're required to do or not to do. I think that would be incredibly helpful if we can kind of check whatever bias we have from the news at the door and just say, what is this? And I think that would be super helpful.
Thank you. I agree. As I was looking related to one of the bills that I sat in on finance, they actually do have the policies and procedures manual on for DCYF. It's not one document, so it's a little hard to do a search and find on it in order to see what we need. I will send a link of that to everybody on the committee and to the administrative rules. And then once we're all thoroughly confused, we'll have DCYF come in and try and explain to us what it is that they do. Because I do know that having it in practice and having it in writing, sometimes there's a disconnect and sometimes we can help with that. Representative Weber?
And I just had one other historical note that came into my mind and left again. When we had the Commission on Child Abuse Fatalities 10 years ago or whenever it was, one of the things we discovered was that at one of the very early meetings, because we had people from DCYF and we had people from the local police departments in the room at the same time, sitting here not doing anything else, and they actually talked to each other, there was a certain amount of discussion in the audience about how the procedures of one of those was not helpful in meshing with the other one. And they realized just by talking to each other that all they had to do was change their procedures. And I think it was around the issue of when things are reported or how, particularly in off hours. But, you know, when you have those people together with some time where they can focus as opposed to doing all the other things, it can be really helpful in creating easy and sensible solutions where there are some, leaving us only with the ones that are really, really difficult.
Thank you, and I agree. It's probably those handoffs where we have the most missed opportunities, because it is really easy to look at these within silos as they go to different committees and they're dealt with separate committees. Just the perspective is somewhat different, and I think that by having this special committee that's not necessarily looking at any particular bills, we have a better opportunity to talk to everybody who's involved and make sure that they have the appropriate empowerment and the appropriate restraints, so that one group isn't assuming that somebody else is taking care of certain situations. Um, because because we need to make sure that that whoever's in the police department handling the reports isn't thinking that it's being taken care of by somebody else. And we need to make sure, we basically need to make sure that for everybody who's involved. Thank you. So with this, the most important, so the takeaways that I'm seeing from this are that I need to send the policies and procedures to everyone and the administrative rules. That we need to schedule a meeting when we can get, probably, let's see how many of the stakeholders we can have for that between DCYF, the Office of the Child Advocate, who I know is watching on the live stream because they weren't able to be here in person today. And we'll see who else seems to be an appropriate fit as well. But I'll put a big open invitation. Probably the Police Chiefs Association would be helpful. You have a recommendation? Fantastic. Our amazing committee researcher has already reached out to make sure that everybody's aware, although she hadn't included the chiefs of police. That was my newer idea, to make sure that they're also on board. So with that, we'll figure out when we can have sort of a longer meeting that we know the public won't be coming and bringing any insight, but we'll be focusing in on that. So to get all those different groups, figure out what we need, and then ask our questions. Representative Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important to see what the communication during all this process is with the family. That seems to be a detachment, whether it's the caregiver for the child, whether it's the parent. What kind of communication is out there? We often hear testimony that I didn't know what was going on for 3 months, or I mean, it just seems like a basic communication issue. These questions are the $1 million questions. They are. And then when you get legislation to attempt to fix it, and it leans one way or the other, protecting the parents or protecting the child, and that's where the debate begins. But I think communication is a key basic that I don't suspect happens, and that could resolve a lot of things. And also with DCYF, how many unfounded over a period of 5 years, maybe, or 3 years? How many unfoundeds were founded a year later? Not the same complaint, but another complaint. And how do they address that? Do they do that data? Do they calculate, geez, we've been slipping here. We got 30% of our unfoundeds were founded within the last, 3 years later. Do we reassess ourselves? How do we drop that number?
That's a great point. And then what services are provided to those families? Is there a way for them to come and talk to other people and discuss their parenting strategies in a low judgment thing? I'm not going to say no judgment, because punching a kid in the face deserves as much judgment as you can get, and a jail term. But there's other areas where there is disagreement about what's appropriate. And I think having a conversation with peers, and especially with mixed viewpoint peers, would be a helpful way to better understand. Sorry, one other thing for Representative Long. Do you think it would also be helpful to make sure that in any communications with families, we have just regular people that are involved in letting us know if they'll actually understand what that paperwork is? Because for those of us here who are used to the legislative words on the forms, it's one thing. But for your average family going through something that's pretty traumatic, we need to make sure that it's actually reaching them where they are. Do you think that
Right, no, absolutely, I do agree. I know 2 years ago or 3 years ago, maybe, DCYF set up a, constituent, I forget what they call it, it's a constituent, group where within DCYF, I've been very fortunate, people that have called me, I turn them over to them and I don't hear back from them, so that's helping. Relations, constituent relations.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Representative Grossman, I know you've been waiting patiently. Microphone, please.
Take on CASA, if CASA would be a stakeholder as well that we should welcome to the table.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point. We may actually need to have a few different days. I don't know if we want to start at those that are most at the nexus and then start spreading beyond that, because I'm not sure if everybody could take the entire day. But if we could do that and then carve out each of the different interactions, that may be a really good way to do some good here. Representative Gregg?
Thank you. And I think when we talk about, I think it's a great idea to see, can people understand this? And I would only caution us as we go into that anybody who's had any kind of trauma in their life, whether it's been a death in your family, you might look back over what you were understanding or what you were thinking at that time and think, wow, I was basically drunk. Like I was not responding the way I would. There was a study years ago about anesthesia. They told people on camera like what the risks of anesthesia were, and then had them come in 2 weeks after their surgery and said, so did you understand, and it was in there, you're going to be paralyzed, like you were paralyzed during the surgery. And they're like, well, nobody told me that. And they went back, they showed them you read this, they showed them, we talked about this. And they're like, no, this must have all been doctored. So there is something in our brain when we're stressed that kind of shuts off. So I would be interested, they might have a way that they think, works with the lay person, but are there other things that they're doing besides just one way of learning, one way of talking about it that might help, because we really all do have that block and we kind of get tunnel vision when we're stressed out. So
That's a very good point. I know there was some discussion about the materials that are supposed to be given to the families. Perhaps it's a matter of making sure that those materials are both accessible and thorough enough, so that people can understand and not get overwhelmed by too much, but also be able to get the additional information they need. Representative Weber?
And I think that there are now some processes that help with this. And the point that was the same point I was going to make. When you are in the middle of a trauma, your memory is not necessarily what it would be. And some of us have memories that aren't what they used to be anyway. And then, somebody hands you the list of all the things you're supposed to do after surgery or what's going to happen with your child's case. And you take that home and you're upset that you can't find the paper ever again. And I think that having points of accessibility is really important. And I know that for me as a legislator, there are both ombudsmen in DHHS who will listen to people's complaints because they should be, and it's a matter of having people find them. And also, the Office of the Child Advocate has been an enormous resource for constituents who have brought problems to me. And they are often people who are not their own best advocates, but they are also people who have a very valid concern. And again, as your experience, the people that I have said, here's the Office of the Child Advocate, perhaps you should talk to them and let them know of your concerns, both personally and as a systemic issue. And because they can then say, oh, we've had 12 complaints about issue A, and maybe we better look at it. And those parents haven't come back and said, yeah, they're one more person not listening to me. So that, I think those are the positive avenues that are available for people, and how to make sure people are well aware of them are also fertile ground.
That's a very good point. Representative Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on that note, I mean, I find the employees sometimes stressed out, go at it negatively. It's tough keeping in mind that I'm working for you. You know, you're a resident in New Hampshire and I'm working for you. When you diminish that power, somebody gets called from DCYF, their hair steps up in the back of their necks. Oh my goodness, what's going on? For that calming to occur, you'll get better results. And I know through my experience having constituents call me, it's been a lack of understanding, or I know where you are. I can imagine how you're feeling. I got to take that in check. You're my 25th call here. I'm going after you. It's a tough thing to do, but I think that's so important, that training.
Thank you. That's a really good point. And then also making sure that if they were exposed to a really traumatic situation, that that's not impacting their view on other, because we're all humans.
Right.
And we need to understand our own limitations and make sure that we're not expecting these caseworkers to be superhumans.
Right.
Yes. Representative Weber?
And I think this is probably also out of our bailiwick, but I think we ought to keep it firmly in mind. When I was doing this work before, the issue was we did not have enough caseworkers or enough positions, and everybody was carrying a caseload that was way in excess of recommended caseloads, according to nationally recognized standards, by a factor of somewhere between 3 and 10. And now we had a wonderful bipartisan coalition that created a lot of new positions. Now, unfortunately, we have the positions and we have the funding and we cannot fill the positions. So once again, we are in that situation where people are often carrying more cases than the optimum and therefore having less time to explain, to get to know, to establish a rapport. And that also leads to less job satisfaction and the kind of issues that you were talking about. So that's very real and it's there. I'm not sure what we can do about it, but we need to keep it in perspective. The other thing that the system has been doing, if I understand it correctly, is starting with the tenure of Director Ribson, is we had one awful case of a father who took his own life and his child's life because he had gone to DCYF and was unable to get help because he was not abusing his child. He was concerned for his child and he couldn't, this makes me want to cry. He could not provide for his child, and in his despair, he took both lives. And there has been an effort to turn the ship around and say, oh, we're not going to wait until everything has failed. We're going to offer services and interventions well upstream, so a family that is struggling has some services before they get to that point of desperation. Because it just seems axiomatic to me that what we ought to be doing is making families stronger when they're intact and offering them the services that they need to strengthen and bolster the caring that they already have, rather than waiting until things disintegrate. Because obviously, anytime we can keep a family intact and supported, that's got to be better for everybody. So, I think the early intervention pieces are, again, maybe not part of our remit. We can talk about that, but I think it's something that we ought to keep clearly in mind as something that has been proven there's a reason that we hire people out of New Jersey to head DCYF. They're eons ahead of us, and they have worked very hard at the early intervention side of things because it's ultimately cheaper and it's healthier for everybody.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point. Early intervention that's asked for, or going in and looking for something where Your child says that you're abusing them because they don't have enough screen time. Because there is a significant issue where there are children who believe that they should be treated in a certain way with certain opportunities, and truthfully and authentically feel that that is abuse from their parents by limiting them to access to that thing that makes them happy. So a lot of it is just things have gotten so out of balance, with kids, with families, with parents, with everybody. And it's a matter of trying to figure out how we can get things back on track. I do like that idea about figuring out a path for people asking for help. Because in those situations, especially when there's sort of a binary choice, here I am and I'm struggling, and if I'm going to do anything, it's that dramatic. How do we make sure that we can help those people, but also not get involved when it's not an appropriate choice?
And Madam Chair, that goes back to the various levels of founded. You know, there are letters of concern and things like that where that is the entire focus of, you know, this is not abuse, but there are concerns here, so we need to here are the things that might help in that situation.
And with that, having a process for those people who are specifically reaching out for help before giving sort of an accused thought crime as well for other people too. We need to figure out those balances. When you brought up the point about caseload, I think that was very important. I think that also needs to be balanced with workload, because it's a matter of figuring out how these cases are handled and how the work process works. I'm curious as to whether these are sort of triaged out to different levels of intensity to start, and once you're triaged into a certain care path, whether or not that's sort of locked in and baked into the cake, if there's more flexibility. And that's something that I'd be really interested in knowing, because if things are sort of baked into the cake based on that initial triage, what happens if if your caseworker just came off of a traumatic case, and so they are seeing monsters around every corner just because of what they had previously experienced? Is a family then triaged into a high level of need when that may not be appropriate? And how do you move families from those different levels, if they do exist within that pathway? Representative Kofalt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think all of this is very important information for us to have. As legislators, beyond the scope of this committee, I think it's very important for us to have a deeper knowledge of the issues and mechanisms around DCYF. Having said that, I want to just sort of come back to the mission of this committee is really to focus on due process. So I do believe that these topics are being discussed insofar as they touch on due process. So, for example, you mentioned stress levels, a caseworker coming off of an especially traumatic case. I mean, I think we hear about these kinds of situations in police work all the time. Is, you know, the stress of the moment, split-second decision. There are stresses with these kinds of high conflict jobs, and that can potentially impact human behavior because we're all human. So I think that insofar as these touch on or somehow impact due process, I think they are sort of within the direct purview of the committee. I do think that it's good for us to be mindful of and learn about the standards and processes and all of this, but I do also want to make sure that we're careful not to engage in too much scope creep as far as the committee's mission is concerned.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Within this classification and all of that, that felt very direct to due process, but we do need to make sure we don't drift too far from that. Representative Love?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few things have been mentioned here that I'd like to bring the flip side to the coin. You know, Representative Weber talked about keeping the family together. Well, with Harmony Montgomery, you had 3 kids living in the back seat of a car. Mom and dad are shooting dope in the front. We missed the line. We missed that cutoff point. We have to define that in no uncertain terms, and you know, as a legislature, and you know, when Madam Chair was talking about you know, the stress, I think we need to look at the other end of it. Have they become numb and are they missing a lot? You know, that this maybe maybe some mental health help for the people that are doing this job is in order.
Yeah,
Thoughts.
supporting the team so that
Mhm.
they can do a better job. Representative Gregg?
Thank you. I keep saying this is my last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm like, oh yeah. So I think with the respect to due process, I appreciate that, and I know that's the focus. I don't think you can truly understand what we're going to consider as due process without understanding the mechanisms of how this entire machine is working, because that is due process. So I think all these pieces that we've said so far are 100% a part of it, because it could even be a lack of understanding of what the process is and stuff. So I think we're very much still on the page of where we should be. And I appreciate everybody's input on that.
Thank you. And looking at this, I think some of that too is that maybe we don't need to get into the definitions of what abuse is. That's something that probably should be handled separately. But looking at that process based upon the legislation, so we can do that. Of course, if those definitions are so broad that due process is being violated, then it would make sense. But if people aren't appropriately informed of their rights because they're told once and the information that they're handed isn't handed to them, then that's a clear due process one, and comes back to what Representative Long was talking about making sure that people are well informed about the process. So I think that we do need that exploration, and then we'll just try and make sure that everything stays within that creep. So Representative Weber?
I think you've actually gotten to the nub of what I was going to say. I really don't see how we can go forward given the varying levels of knowledge of what actually happens that are on this committee. Mine is admittedly very old, except in very small cases that I deal with. But I think we need to have a basic understanding of what the current process is, because I know that in every discussion that I've ever been part of, due process has been a part of that discussion. The question is, let's find out what we're doing now, find out where the slips are, and see if changes need to be made because of what we're seeing in the real world. But I think that until we all have that same baseline, that means that we're all on the same page. It's for us to make assumptions about what is not helpful.
That is a very good point. And there were very good materials put together under due process that we all need to review before we have these discussions with DCYF, Office of the Child Advocate, and everybody who's involved, so that we're both looking at the processes and making sure that due process is being followed within that path. So, Representative Weber?
I would submit that finding out what is being done now is the starting point, and then examining what is being done now for whether it comports with due process would be the way to go. Because if we have far-reaching discussions of due process in the absence of the focus of what's actually happening on the ground, I think that is less helpful. And I think we come at it from two different directions. One is hearing from people, which we have already started to do and which we will be doing throughout, and hearing from the people whose charge it is the beginning, rather than beginning with the due process concept. We need to know what's happening and then see if it's falling short or what could be done to improve it.
Thank you. And that's why we need to make sure that we can have an ongoing dialogue, an ongoing process where where we'll be able to have them come back in for more discussion over time, so that we can make sure that the policies and procedures are what they need to do, that they work appropriately with all of the other engaged bodies where you're expecting somebody else will be handling the situation, and then making sure that those rights are protected within that. Because when there's more knowledge of what's happening, you have a much higher likelihood of people actually following through and complying with what we're asking for them. Because if they don't understand what's being asked of them, it's really hard for them to expect them to follow through. So we have 6 minutes before we will be opening it up to the public. I do want to give a preview of another area that I would like us to work on. We won't be meeting over the summer, so if we're digging into this deep enough and making great progress that I may wait on the other one until later. Educational neglect is handled within DCYF, even though they are not educators. There's been some work on this in the past. They're the ones who review a homeschooler's portfolio to determine whether their progress is appropriate given their age and ability. Um, and that seems like a mission creep that's possibly taking away from these other cases where we're talking about physical abuse or sexual abuse or something where there is more training from the caseworkers. The idea of saying about transitioning that over to the Department of Education may be a better fit because, quite frankly, we ask a lot of our caseworkers. Expecting them to be experts in academic childhood development seems to be a stretch, especially when we're having trouble filling those roles and we have caseload. We have caseload issues as well. So that's something sort of to keep in the back of the mind. I'll get more information to everybody on that as well, but I want to make sure that we do have appropriate due process for families that are going through these more physical related issues. And by making sure that we're not tasking caseworkers with something that is outside of their wheelhouse, that can have better focus, make sure that it is better considered, and just make sure that we are moving things to the correct areas. So that one I'll leave to the future. But Representative Weber?
I just want to be sure that we're talking about similar things because educational neglect in the sense, I mean, what I have seen and heard about with respect to DCYF, which doesn't mean that there isn't other things going on, it just means I haven't heard about it, is the look at whether a child is actually being schooled at all. And there are any number of cases that come to DCYF because there is no schooling. And that is an issue of neglect. I think when we're talking about, I would agree with you 100% if we're talking about reviewing how a homeschooler is being homeschooled and whether that's appropriate or not. I wasn't aware that anybody was actually reviewing that, so we need to find out more about what's actually happening with that. But the cases that I have heard of in CASA work where there's an issue of educational neglect, it has been because not only is the child theoretically enrolled in a public school and not attending, but they also, or they may have, because I tend to hear about cases with older children, there are cases where the parent is unable to govern the behavior of their kid and has said, well, I'm homeschooling because that's the easiest thing to say. And I think that is a very different case from somebody overseeing the whole homeschool process, which is something else again.
Thank you. That's a good insight. So this is a process where if somebody has a complaint about why are these children in their yard during the school day, that goes to DCYF. So homeschoolers and people who simply are not attending school all are funneled into this through the truancy issues. So this is one where after we get a good grasp of what's happening with the whole abuse process, then that's something that we can look into and get some buy-in from the Department of Education as well, and from all of those that are involved. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association has represented families in New Hampshire who have had some interesting interactions with DCYF regarding educational neglect. So balancing all of this makes sense because quite frankly, we can get into that full discussion later, but the idea that they're reviewing and trying to understand if a child who may be working on some more remedial writing skills, but they're doing physics at an age that's far sooner, if that is appropriate for their age and ability, because they can't write to save their life. Oh, they're working on it, they're making progress, but that's hard. But when it comes to numbers, they're a wizard. And I went to MIT, there were plenty of kids like that. We don't have good social skills either. So with that, I we'll get those policies and administrative rules out. I would like to get an idea of any specific areas where people have questions or concerns so that we can sort of let the DCYF, the Office of the Child Advocate, and others who are involved know which areas we are starting off with some questions. But I would like to have an overview from them when we're able to schedule that. We can now close our work session. I know everybody's waiting patiently. I will actually open it at about 11:05 because I need to run down the hall before we start the hearing, and I want to make sure that everybody from the public who's here in order to share with us are appropriately heard. So, with that, we'll start up again at 11:05. Thank you. Thank you and welcome to the regular meeting of the Special Committee on the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. If you saw from our work session, we do have people coming in and out because people do have other meetings that are scheduled and some people have certain commitments. So if there's somebody who is coming in or somebody who is leaving during this time, please don't take that personally. We have all of this that will be available for review so that everybody will be watching and seeing what you have to say, even if you had to leave, even if they have to leave to get to another meeting. With that, we have 4 people that have given me a card to speak. With the amount of time, just so that we can make sure that we can balance everybody's time, I will let you know when you've reached the amount of time that you've requested, and then I'll let you finish up with your statement. Then we will ask you questions. If you feel that you don't have enough, you haven't said enough, well, first, we're all people. Our brains can only handle so much at one time. So it's far more effective to give us 3 minutes of information than 10, and far more helpful to have 10 minutes of information than half an hour, because we can only retain so much of what you have to say. And so by keeping it focused, we can get your clear message from you. This is just always important whenever you're sharing information with others. So the other part is that I know that there is some interest around the area of oaths. The state law allows for the provision of the legislature to administer an oath, but the only way that that really can be handled and brought forth is under perjury. And under perjury, which is a Class B felony with a sentence of up to 7 years in prison and a fine of up to $4,000, there's protections for statements that are believed to be true, even if they're false or inconsistent with other information. That makes it a very, very difficult case to deal with, whether or not you were trying to bring that from the Attorney General, or if you were trying to defend against that, because there's a viewpoint difference and there's the potential of how it could be applied. So there is always that challenge. I am coming into this with the expectation that people are going to be truthful and give me the information that they can and the information that they want. The more that you can back anything up with documents, that goes to further reinforce what you say. But I ask you to please be careful. If you provide any documents, they become part of the public record. If there are information that you, and anything that you say here as well, is on the YouTube channel that is saved for the legislature and is available to the public. As I stated earlier in our work session before many of you arrived, Part 1, Article 30 of the New Hampshire Constitution only protects the speech of legislators and not the public in this body. So please be careful of what you do say, because I don't want your testimony to then cause problems for you, especially if you have active cases. I really care that you all are here taking time out of your day to talk with us and help us to try and improve due process within DCYF. But I also want to make sure that I just want to make sure that everybody is as safe and protected as possible. So with this, I will not be administering oaths. People may say whatever they would like in their testimony. And Representative Weber?
And I just had one other point of clarification, if you approve of it, Madam Chair, which is that it seemed to me that at some points in earlier testimony, we went farther afield into the entire family court process. And I understand that they are interrelated, but it seems to me that the charge of this committee is DCYF. So if there is a concern about DCYF being weaponized in a divorce case, that is something we ought to know about. But just the process of people's divorces or other family court matters, of which there are any number, are outside of our scope. So what we need to do is focus very carefully on the interactions with DCYF and how that impacts the lives of whoever's testifying.
Thank you. That is a very good point. If you're getting into court procedures, while there may very likely be a due process tie-in, we are trying to focus on the DCYF involvement and almost what I think of as the feeder system, because unless there's an interaction with DCYF, you're not in. That seems to be what is part of the process for people who have had challenges in the family courts. So I'd like to keep this focused more on the DCYF aspects of this. And as I said before, I saw one card that is on the longer side. There are several of us that do have other appointments and other meetings, so that if anybody leaves, it's not a personal issue. And so first, I will call Representative Leah Cushman, and you've asked for 3 minutes. Your microphone's not on.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, sitting here listening, as you all know, I asked the speaker for this committee after the people instructed me to, via notices that they provided, drawing attention and making, showing controverting evidence that due process as required by Part 1, Article 15 of the New Hampshire State Constitution is being violated. It's not being provided. Before you take any liberties or rights from people, you must find guilt by a trial by jury. That's in a court of record that moves by common law. Everything else that is being talked about right now is extraneous details. Fact finding is done by juries. Whether the circumstances of a case provide for leniency, that's determined by a jury. So the committee is getting way off track, and to say that family court discussion has to be limited is totally antithetical to the whole point of this committee. It's about due process related to DCYF. And DCYF takes children by bringing a petition to family court where there is no trial by jury and the facts are not found by a jury and it doesn't move under common law and the evidence is picked and choosed as to how it's going to be weighed. Okay, so all of those things are way off track. The first thing that the members of this committee need to understand is you already all swore oath to protect those rights under Part 1, Article 15. You swore already. Now you've been given notice. Now you're receiving it again. You swore. If you break that, you're breaking the contract. Okay, that's maladministration. So that is the main responsibility of this committee, is to ensure that the people are getting trial by jury before think of it. Losing a child is akin to capital punishment. That's something that needs to be dealt with in a trial by jury. You can't take rights, you can't take liberties, you need a trial by jury. The only thing that can change this, maybe Part 1, Article 15 should be read every 5 minutes in this committee, so it keeps your eye on the ball. After hearing at the last meeting the testimony of Andrew Noyes, it laid out very eloquently what is required by the Constitution. So I recommend going back and listening to that, maybe transcribing it and keeping it taped in front of you. I reached out to DCYF via email after the last meeting, and I said, after I heard what I heard today, I can only conclude that what's happening is very unlawful, and please, I'm bringing it to your attention as well. Please make it stop. I asked.
I'm going to extend you to 10 minutes because you're already at 3 minutes. So.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The legislature used to hear, this is really what's going on, is the people are coming and saying, help. Our rights are being violated. You promised that you would ensure that we have these rights at all times and that you would be at all times accountable to us, and that if there is an abrogation of rights happening, that without delay we would deal with it. And it's been lost throughout history in the way that things have been run in this body, but redress of grievance is our first job in the Constitution. Writing laws is second. And at the beginning of this country, the very first act was to deal with a redress of grievance. And then all the committees that formed were not subject matter committees. They were committees named after the person whose issue had been brought forth. They met. Sometimes they would make special acts just to fix this this wrong for this one person. You know, this is completely doable, and you'll get. I don't want to get too far off, but that's really your main job here, is to ensure the constitutional protections of the people. All the other stuff, like a jury of your peers, is the best body to determine of whether you've committed a harm that deserves severe punishment or, you know, lesser punishment. Juries find the facts. They're a representative body of the people as well. And that trial by jury is such an integral part of our rights in this country. I mean, the courts of common pleas existed here before the instituting of this form of government, the Republican government. So, I mean, it's carried from the English common law, and the fundamental principles behind the Constitution are the common law. And the Constitution in Part 1, Article 30 says the people, it says a frequent recurrence to the fundamental principles of the Constitution and a constant adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, frugality, and all social virtues are indispensably necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and good government. That's what the people did with those notices. They pointed us to the fundamental principles, and they're saying, help us now fix this. So for DCYF to have administrative tribunals where they find fact, they're acting as investigator, which is usually executive branch function, right? Law enforcement. Then they're acting as the judge and jury, and they're issuing a penalty in the form of putting you on that registry, which limits your job abilities, volunteer abilities, maybe potentially your custody of your children if you get divorced later. All of that steps into the realm of taking liberties, and it requires a trial by jury. There's a federal case that was already ruled in against the SEC. It's SEC versus Jarchese, and it's in the Supreme Court now, and it's looking at this too. Congressman Thomas Massey just had a reining in the administrative state kind of committee that is looking at these issues too, and he received notices. And so you take the instructions and you follow what the people are telling you. If they're showing you that their rights that you swore to protect are not being protected, and stay focused on that, and stay focused on what the trust indenture that is the New Hampshire Constitution, that all of the constitutions are, their express trusts. What they say in Part 2 is what is, how government is to operate, and Part 1 is reserved back to the people. We're not supposed to drift into any part of Part 1 to mess with it or shortcut it. You have to keep it the way it is. So DCYF, if they get a call, the way I see it, they get a call. They go in. They can ask voluntarily to work with the family and see. We understand there's a problem going on, and the family can voluntarily work with them. But if not, you have to do a sworn affidavit to confer jurisdiction to the court for them to then issue a warrant and then have an investigation. So like you can't even have a warrant without someone making an accusation. And actually in this state, everyone is a mandated reporter. It's not just, that's just a common misconception that it's only certain people and professionals. And I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a side point, but and that also would prevent frivolous and, retaliatory and malicious claims and accusations being filed and then not being held accountable because, filing a false police report or committing perjury in an affidavit, those are crimes. those can be held accountable too in criminal court. So I just look at, you've got to bring them into a court of record where the magistrate is independent of the cause at hand, meaning they're not getting paid by the same program as who brought the cause forward. They're not a part of the same agency that brought it forward, right? They have to be impartial. The jury is chosen from their peers. All the facts are tested by the jury, and all of this is underpinned, and the court is moved by common law in criminal court and in civil court. That's how it's supposed to be. But these statutes have been implemented that sidestep that, and it's all null and void. So it needs to be completely redone and thrown away and fixed. As far as, there's a maxim of law that says prevention is better than cure. There's a lot of people who have already been very severely hurt by these unconstitutional courts, and the state of New Hampshire might be liable in the future for what occurred there, if it's true that, and I fully believe that it is, that how it's being done is not constitutional. So we got to consider that, and then the very real harms to the families on both sides, because if you have an impartial tribunal that's actually judiciary with a real judge and jury, it not only will it be more difficult to for someone's subjective gatekeeping to let a real harm be gotten away with, but either way, you know what I mean? It also will prevent innocent people from being prosecuted.
Thank you. That's been 10 minutes. I do want to read for everybody Part First, Article 15. No subject shall be held to answer for any crime or offense until the same is fully and plainly, substantially, and formally described to him, or be compelled to accuse or furnish evidence against himself. Every subject shall have the right to produce all proofs that may be favorable to himself, to meet the witnesses against him face to face, and to be fully heard in his defense by himself and counsel. No subject shall be arrested, imprisoned, despoiled, or deprived of his property, immunities, or privileges, put out of protection of the law, exiled or deprived of his life, liberty, or his estate, but by the judgment of his peers or the law of the land, provided that in any proceeding to commit a person acquitted of a criminal charge by reason of insanity, due process shall require that clear and convincing evidence that the person is potentially dangerous to himself or to others, and that the person suffers from a mental disorder must be established. Every person held to answer in any other crime or offense punishable by deprivation of liberty shall have the right to counsel at the expense of the state if need is shown. This right he is at liberty to waive, but only if after the matter has been thoroughly explained by the court. So my question to you is, in order to understand if that is being done, is it reasonable to find out the policies and the procedures and the intersection between everybody involved?
I think it's already been presented that the way DCYF is doing things and the way the legislature set things up is incorrect. And so now we're all aware of it. So whatever the policies and procedures are, they're kind of secondary. You just have to move forward and start and just put everything, DCYF needs to get sworn affidavits and bring it to the court. They know how to do that. They've done it. I've read cases where they did that. So
Okay, thank you.
respectfully, I think it's already been presented. I think that all the policies and procedures will have to be redone later in the perspective of keeping in line with this, with Part 1, Article 15, and the rest of the Constitution. And I did just want to make, if I may, Madam Chair, one more.
There's one other question. We'll see
Sure.
if maybe it gets you there. Representative Weber?
Are you aware that every single DCYF case starts in court with a sworn affidavit?
That's good, but why doesn't it stay there and then proceed to a trial by jury? That's where it goes wrong. If that's how it starts, then that's the accuser. And then the person has a right to face that accuser under due process. I think the committee needs to really understand what common law due process is And common law is just those fundamental principles. They're the maxims of law. As an attorney, I'm sure you're very familiar with them. The established maxims, they're basically the laws of law, and they're what judges use to help guide juries in finding fact and making decisions, as well as the rulings of courts. So that all of that comes together to provide what has been consistently and through custom and usage over time shown to be fair and constitutional due process. So that's what I would say is from there they should be taking charges. You can't be soft on crime and then not you're on one side being soft on crime by bringing it into a quasi civil, quasi criminal venue, right, where they don't get a criminal penalty, and you're kind of stringing them along for a year and a half or however long with all these hearings, and they might get a chance and they go through therapy and they do this and that, but that's all sidestepping. If a parent knows that if they hurt someone that they're going to be criminally charged, that's quite a disincentive. It's quite an incentive to, be doing the right thing. On top of it, so you're soft on crime on one side in those tribunals, and then in the family court and the way it's done, and then on the other side we're saying, well, a lot of kids are left to be harmed. Well, I mean, that's why. It's because the facts aren't being found the constitutional way. The founders were very smart, and this trial by jury, was consistently shown to be like just such a foundational requirement of our form of government and society at the founding and going back to England.
Thank you. Follow up from Representative Weber and then Representative Gregg.
Thank you, and I'm reminding myself that this is not the time to dialogue about my beliefs versus your beliefs because they are very different. But and we will have that discussion in a work session, which is where it's appropriate. My second question to you is, are you aware of the fact that DCYF proceedings are not criminal in nature? They are not held in the criminal court, and they are a different kind of proceeding entirely.
Yes, thank you. They are administrative tribunals, and they are unconstitutional.
Thank you. Representative Gregg?
I'm just curious, and what you posed and are saying is necessary for somebody to be accused or have their children taken away. I guess I'm missing the point where the child's constitutional right comes in as far as being able to be safe and have their own rights. Do the parents' rights and their ability to go to court and have this whole jury trial supersede any danger to the child? Like, because those are a process. You have to pick a jury, you have to get lawyers, like you're talking months or years. So how does that work in protecting kids?
So it's kind of a trick question. The child's rights are being protected when someone puts in a sworn affidavit seeking due process to get a penalty for this child and get this child safe. So if that parent then is arrested because of that evidence in the form of a sworn affidavit, they go to jail, their child goes to the next of kin. If they don't have next of kin, then there's a place for DCYF to come in and get involved. But I mean, that's why we have bail. That's why we have preliminary hearings. There's likely a constitutional way to keep a child safe while the due process is being carried out. But that's why due process also is supposed to be prompt, without delay. You're supposed to have a speedy trial. We have all these protections.
A follow up from Representative Gregg.
Yes, thank you. And by the way, thank you. I forgot to thank you earlier. And thank you for taking our questions and for being here. So in this, hopefully I didn't lose my train of thought. The problem is when you're investigating something, and I don't know if you heard me earlier, that what one person might think is abuse, another person sees as, well, I'm just child rearing. This is my right to knock my kid into next week if they're not behaving or whatever. So there has to be an investigation done. So you wouldn't arrest somebody before an investigation is done. And I think that's what the process is now. How would that work? because you don't want to just arrest everybody that gets accused without proper, I would think that would be more offensive to their rights of just being arrested when we're trying to do an investigation. So where's that balance on that?
Well, I guess that's a good question, but it's kind of a misunderstanding about how criminal investigations are done. Usually people are arrested when they have preliminary evidence, and that affidavit would provide that the jurisdiction for the court to then issue a warrant for that person to be arrested. And then any attempt to, before or during the arrest or after it, interfere with the ability for the investigation to be carried out, that would be problematic for the person who is trying to stop that. And anyway, in the interim, the child, either the parent would be in jail awaiting trial, or they would be out on bail and likely would have preliminary orders from a judge that they weren't allowed to be near that child.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing with us. I hope you stay involved. Thank you. Traditionally, we will hear representatives first. My question, though, Representative Horrigan, do you have other committee business? Because we had a few come in before you. If you don't, if you wouldn't mind. Okay. Okay, I will set a 2-minute timer and hold you to that. Is that all right, Representative Horrigan? I'll make sure it's loud on the microphone.
So I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 10, the town of Durham, and you don't really have an enviable job ahead of me. I was part of a similar initiative, back in my second term, which is a long time ago, 2011 to 2012, the Petitions and Redress Committee, and that's why I put in the pink card, because Reverend Quishman referred to that element of the Constitution, and we ran into many problems. One was, it wasn't clear what our procedures were, which I guess it's a little bit clearer for your group. But also, we mostly dealt with similar disputes, and also people about DCYF, which certainly is not perfect, but we often hear from only one parent when there's another parent and other family members involved. So the F is families, and also we have children and youth. So the children are human beings in their own right and have their own concerns, which often get lost in the shuffle. So, and that's one thing to keep in mind. Also, people often tend to do data dumps on it, which I think looks like that's happening today, where they provide a voluminous amount of material, which may or may not support the conclusion that we're expected to draw from. It's just there's a huge stack of paper doesn't necessarily mean that what's being said is accurate. And we didn't put people under oath either. That was a wise decision on your part not to, Madam Chair. But people would often certainly submit affidavits, and those affidavits, first of all, sometimes even the facts that people swear to in affidavits are false, and often the material they put in the affidavit is not really factual either. It's just their conclusions about the law, and that's just because you put an affidavit and then maybe put a bunch of gassy prologues on it doesn't necessarily mean that document is of any relevance. So that's something else to keep in contact with. And also something we struggled with and was just sort of the confidentiality of the data, because people often submit very personal information, which maybe is not necessarily appropriate to be passing around in an open House committee proceeding. So anyway, good luck. You won't be able to sort this out before the end of the session, but maybe you can make a little bit of progress. So thanks. That's what I wanted to say, basically.
Thank you very much, Representative Horrigan. I realize we have a challenge in front of us, and you were just about on the 2 minutes, so thank you. Yes. Next, we have Robert Lamontagne. I had already had you next in the stack. I do see that you're from Vermont in the future. I think we'll probably be limiting testimony to people from New Hampshire, since this is New Hampshire DCYF, unless they've had involvement with New Hampshire DCYF. But Mr. Lamontagne, you've asked for 10 minutes, so I'll have my little timer let you know when you're there, so then you can conclude your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to me. My name is Robert Lamontagne. I'm originally from New Hampshire. I was born in this town in 1964. I left New Hampshire because I got strong-armed out of this state because of the state laws that they created. back in 1988, I was ambushed into a child endangerment crime, 3 counts. I went to trial. I didn't take a plea deal. The then county attorney never turned over exculpatory evidence in my trial and put a known detective on the stand that had credibility issues 5 years before I was ever charged or convicted of anything. I didn't find this out until over 40 years later. I went to prison in this town for almost 10 years. My children are gone. They're just gone. We don't talk. I was poisoned by the Department of Child Welfare. I was poisoned by the family court system. And not only was I poisoned, but I was both physically and mentally and verbally told that I did these things. It's hard for me to come up here and talk with a bunch of strangers that I don't even know about what I went through. I can imagine all the other thousands and thousands of people that are out there that have been in the same position as I am, that are not strong enough to come up here and grow a backbone and tell the public about what's going on. I don't know what else to say other than the fact that I'm not going to stop. If I got to keep coming to these hearings once a month and testify against you guys, I will. But something has to be done about this. If we let the people that did this to all of us get away with this, then you give Joe and Jane Public the eternal right to do the same damn thing to any one of them. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lamontagne. I'm so sorry for everything that you went through and that your family went through with this. Specifically, it sounds like making sure that all evidence is presented in a timely way and that the trial is speedy. Would those be two things that would be important to address in order to make you realize, make you understand that we're trying to make sure that nobody else has to go through a situation
I
like
don't
that?
know what to believe anymore. I just don't know.
Thank you. It's got to be hard. Representative Weber?
I was also going to ask as a follow-up, both to your testimony and Representative Leon's question, is it of any help to you in your quest to know that since the time when all of this happened to you, we have now made significant strides and people are working now and going forward on ensuring issues of credibility of the members of the police force that come and testify, and that they are no longer protected when they have
I
complaints
still
based
don't
on their
know what to
credibility.
believe.
Okay.
Okay, because I've been lied to. I've been taken advantage. They poisoned me against my own kids.
And I know there's no way to make up for that.
Oh, I know that
Yeah.
there is no way to make up for it. But how do you expect me to trust anybody in this room when I've been betrayed so badly?
We can't ask that of you. But thank you for coming up with and sharing this with us. I thank you. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Next, I'd like to call Robert Tangway, I believe. You gave us 10 minutes, and I will set the timer for 10 minutes. I'll bring it up to this if it gets to there so that you can just conclude your statements at that point. Thank you. Turned it off.
It always gets me. Thank you so much, everybody. My name is Robert Tanguay. I've spoken before the special committee and having a lot of problems with the family courts and also DCYF. I'm going to start out going wide, then I'm going to get specific, and then I'm going to get wide again, maybe make some recommendations. I appreciate you all really trying to solve this. It's not an easy situation. What I passed out to the committee, it's to show what's really going on. As I wrote a letter, which is a guide, but then on the back is fraud that's been spread at the governor's office. Defamation spread about at the governor's office. I swear everything I'm saying is the best to my knowledge, so help me God. Because God does exist. God is nature. It's the foundation of our Constitution, which was created prior to the US Constitution, 4 years prior. And afterwards, we got our Fourth Amendment protections. The Constitution protects us from the government, which the government is just people. And people always do what's in their best perceived interest. They're always going to do what they feel is right, justified, and then we have laws, we have constitutions. As speaking prior, someone, I think it was Rep. Greg, was talking about the child's rights. And if you read the Constitution, if you've ever been despoiled of anything, you read the Constitution, it will make you weep because it was done to protect us. Article 2, natural rights. All men have certain natural, essential, and inherent rights, among which are the enjoying and defending of life, liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and in a word, seeking and obtaining happiness. Now, I want to bring back to property because the family unit, women and children used to be considered property in the Constitution. And you might say that that's a horrible thing, but they still don't have to register for selective service. Women should be able to vote. Women should be able to do everything men can do, based on your own abilities. But this property, the family unit, the courts are not looking at this appropriately. We have a family. When a person breaks up a family, that is abuse on a child. That hurts a child. And take it from someone who's never had a father, or the guy who was a father was killed in a truck accident. And I grew up very hurt. The reason why I'm here is because I've gone to everybody else. If you'll see on that piece of paper, I've been to the governor's office, the attorney general, the mayor of Manchester, DHHS, DCYF, the Manchester, Concord, and Wyndham Police, the family courts, lawyers, judges, Bar Association, New Hampshire Legal Aid, which, by the way, their website doesn't even work. They get federal and state grant money. Their website doesn't even work. I make websites for a living. I could fix it in days. It's misappropriation of money. I'm not angry at any of you. I'm just being passionate about what's going on, because these people are getting hundreds of millions of dollars, DCYF, the family courts, judges, lawyers, to pretend like they know exactly what is right or wrong. I've gone to the special committee for the family courts. The House Speaker asked for more time. Been to the New Hampshire Coalition for Domestic Violence. I believe that they're the ones who put this propaganda. It says in this letter that I was ordered to have a mental evaluation or I would have to have supervised visits, and I refused it. That's not true. I was never ordered mental evaluation. I was never ordered supervised visits. The lawyer didn't even, opposing counsel didn't even ask for that. So I'm being human trafficked, and so are my children. And I've reported it to the Manchester police. They hung up on 911. That's after the Attorney General told me in writing, if I feel my children are being abused, I'm sorry, not the Attorney General, Jimenez, so deputy, that if I feel like I'm being abused, call 911. So I eventually did after calling the Manchester police. So you guys are talking about bringing these chiefs of police here. They're all in on it. Now, not to say that the police do what is, most of the stuff that they do is very good, but there's an inherent bias. And that bias is to protect women and children. And women get all the protections under the law unless, and I've talked to a lot of families, the father, the man, is more politically connected. So what we're having is a system of judges, lawyers, administrators, department heads, all appointed by the governor, Supreme Court justice as well. And Governor Sununu is not a good governor. I've been reaching out to him for over a year in writing. He has a lawyer, Rudy, who won't give me this. I caught it on video and I know what it says. He won't give it. They're just playing games. They don't really want to help the children. So when we get to the family courts and we're looking at everything is decided by the courts, everything. Anyone in here can be accused of anything or say that someone's violating me. They can be, the police get to choose who to investigate, who to prosecute. The judges decide whatever they want. And in my specific case, they ordered and then reaffirmed the order physically and mathematically impossible findings of fact. Physically and mathematically impossible findings of fact. That's fraud. They know about it based on the evidence that they received. The lawyer knows about it. The lawyer has a duty to report this to the judge. The judge knows about it. Signed affidavits. They hide it because the first thing the police do when you go to them is you say, they say, do you have a lawyer? This is the way it needs to go. If a child is being abused, you go to the police. The police, unlike in Harmony Montgomery's case, make an arrest if there's probable cause. And that's what we're all forgetting. At the end of all this is the Manchester police and their inherent bias because they have a contract out, which I will get to you guys. I was trying to find that right now, but I can't find it. But it was a contract signed to only train prosecutors, judges, police only to protect women, only. And then the grant was given to someone on the domestic violence task force, which effectually is a pay raise of a 25% pay raise for $55,000. I can say this because I have the contracts signed by Diane Martin on November 30th, 2022, which was the same day that a fictitious domestic violence petition was put against me. So some of the specifics, and I know that it's a lot, and I do appreciate what you said, Madam Chair, about there's only so much we can handle. We need a jury trial. In most cases, you can have settled family matters in the family courts if the judges aren't lying. The judges are lying because it's called an expedited child support. And I really appreciate, there's a contract for it with the AOC. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I understand that it's a lot. I call DCYF 633:7 is human trafficking. Part 3 of it is abuse by abuse of the legal process. I would say fraud. I would say that ordering me to violate a protection order and then holding me in contempt for not violating that protection order after I gave the judges and courts over and over, here's 173B, here's what you have to do, which is the protection order. We need to start repealing laws. We need to start, which 173B is unconstitutional. It's at the Supreme Court right now. I'm arguing that. It's unconstitutional via Article 15. Article 14 is the protection of access to justice, no denial of justice, no cost. All our laws that you create and that we uphold are all based upon the Constitution. And it all makes sense. You can't kill anybody, you can't attack anybody, only in self-defense. So there's two things that this committee can do.
If you can just wrap up with it, it sounds like you are.
Thank you. There's two things this committee can do. It can record this testimony, which it's doing now, and that be a message, and work with the individual agencies, including the judiciary, which they are watching this. And if they don't correct their behavior, the legislator has a constitutional power and duty to remove these justices. And I think it's getting very close to the point where when judges are lying and writing fraud and then hiding and abusing the legal process, that's at this point. I'd hope that anybody has any questions. I know I was kind of a little all over the place, but I would appreciate any questions if you do have them.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? No, thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Okay.
I hope that you saw that when we're going to be looking for this, we want to make sure that things are handled appropriately, moving between different groups, so that if anything's been dropped in the process, that we can solve those problems.
Okay.
So thank you.
So then I do want to make a very fair note. Okay. So this is a picture of criminal defamation at the governor's office. This group and the legislators have a duty and a power to impeach the governor. And then here's all the other things. So I will be giving you the specific names, such as Judge Previtt.
So if you want to give that to us in writing, I need to understand exactly what it is that you're asking, and
This
we're
is my
limited.
testimony.
Thank you.
And I have absolutely no problem saying these names because I know 100% that the record provides it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Next, we have Katrina Heinrich. You said 3 minutes. Is that 3 minutes? Solid or? Okay, perfect. I'll let you know when it's there so that then you can wrap up. Thank you. Don't rush.
Good morning, everybody. I was going to start off with something part of my DCYF experience, but I wanted to touch real quick, and this might cause my 3-minute issue. Mr. Tangway brought up a point, and it has some merit, and I think it's something you guys should look into. So when judges are writing orders because of, or I should say family court judges, there is an opinion that they're writing. Now that's from our own Supreme Court. They wrote an opinion of what a marital master or referee can do. They can write an opinion. It is not an enforceable order. The state then put on a caveat that a official judge, in other words, an officer of the state, could sign off and basically rubber stamp it. The caveat is they are not to put too much time into reading it because they claim their lack of resources, and I totally believe it. Time is a resource. But once that gets signed or stamped, that order now becomes real. It's not real when it's written, but then it becomes very real. And at that point, if there's falseness in it, it becomes a libelous order, which is something that I have personally experienced. So that is my understanding of the way that works. With that said, I will move on. With the DCYF piece, and I'm going to give you a little clarification. DCYF got involved in my case because there was an assault on my oldest child by the other parent. Something unfortunately I had to witness, something she had to experience, and then I wound up experiencing also my forms of abuse off of it. With that said, DCYF did not get immediately involved, but we did get pushed there. It was a pushed mechanism. my biggest focus as a mom at that point, and you guys can understand this if I get emotional, so bear with me, was the health and well-being of my daughter. I could care less about what the other person did. I could care less about the arrest that just happened down the road as the person runs away. What I cared about was my daughter. And I knew at this point, I'd already experienced enough to know that things were getting very bad. My goal was to get out. And I did speak to you guys last week about this. I got divorced, got out. Immediately found myself pulled right back in on motions of we're going to change things. Well, okay, make something, do something, make that little amendment, whatever you got to do. Let's move on. 10 years in court is not just a little amendment or a little change. That is when I started digging into what is the motivations behind some of this. Right back up into it, another DCYF event happened. DCYF chose not to get involved. But again, it looked really, really bad on the other person. And this was because the hospital, a local hospital, called the police 2 nights in a row for me to come and get my children. One of them was trying to be admitted on psychiatric evaluations. But the police actually was called by the hospital on the other parent. It wasn't the child. When I went in to get the children, the police officers told me, look, this is the 2nd night in a row. You really, really need to come and get these kids and get a restraining order and stuff. I said, I've tried that, but I need reports. Be at the police station 9 o'clock. I get there, I'm met at the window. The administrator tells me, Chief of Police says there's not going to be any reports. Okay. When we actually get the log, the police log was false. It actually says 2 nights in a row, Kyle called juvenile delinquent. It was never a call on the child. It was a call on the other parent. So that's false. It's absolutely false. With that said, I got pushed right over into, as you already know, family court. And what I started noticing was there had to be reasons this was happening. So having a financial back, yep.
Just up to that, I'll give you another 2 minutes to wrap it up.
Yep. I just got into the financial part of it. I had to start looking at what was really, truly going on. And that led me to Title IV. And as far as I am concerned, all the research I've done over the past 10 to 12 years, Title IV is the catalyst to what is running the family court. We know that the state gets large amounts of money from them. We also know that if you read through Title IV, and I'll give you the actual piece so you guys have it, incentive payments to the states under Section 458 of U.S. Code 42, 658A. That is incentive payments, and this has to do with your Title IV. With that piece, there's also some consent issues that need to be addressed in Title IV that is not happening. One of the pieces that is relevant is the judiciary salary, like a judge, an officer of the state, cannot be paid out of Title IV money, but marital masters and referees can, which then bring you to how the state has set up the family court organization. It is completely ran with a loose oversight of the judicial branch by private contractors. Referees are private contractors, marital masters are private contractors, GALs are private contractors, therapists are private contractors, attorneys, technically, private contractors. The list goes on. So the organization itself seems to be very structured as a business entity, which, according to what I've read about the way the state structured it, that's exactly what they intended to do. It is privately ran. And I'm unsure how we get due process rights when it's ran by private citizens and there's no oversight. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Title IV. There's Title IV links and money.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that tie into the due process. Is there any questions from anybody? Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing all that insight with us. Let's see. So now I have 3 other cards. One's for 7 minutes, one's for 10 minutes, one's for 30 to 40 minutes. Mr. Noon? Would you mind limiting it to 10 minutes, or otherwise I'm going to put you at the end of the stack, just to respect everybody's time? Okay. There will be more in the future. So if you can limit it to one topic so that we don't get overwhelmed and talk to us just about one part of that, that would help us a lot. Will do. Thank you. Donald Gilbert. Thank you. I have you down for 7 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Many of you in this room know who I am, what most of my testimonies are about. Many of you have received emails in depth about many of these Title IV issues. It's really something that we need to take more serious, and there's a reason why we're all here today. It's not just a misappropriation of funds, but it is a gross neglect on behalf of our state. And the federal government is cracking down. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. Child support is a big aspect of that, that ties into all of this, that some of these members have received emails on. While everybody's focusing more on the due process side of the parents, I take a different approach and do focus on the due process side of the children as well. And while a lot of people will disagree or agree with my positionings on it, I do feel that if we were following the protocols, the policies, and the laws on the books today, we would not be abusing the due process of the parents, children, and all parties involved. That being said, that is not occurring. It's just outright not. Speaking to a point that Representative Weber said that all of these DCYF cases start in court. That is absolutely unfactual. These cases do not start in court. Most of the time, they are being closed out as founded, problem resolved, so that they can procure criminal charges. Because if you look at the statute of 169C and the criminal prosecution of any of these entities or issues, you cannot criminally charge somebody. There's under 169C 12A, I believe, there is use immunity for any person that's involved with DCYF for criminal conviction. You are not allowed to charge anybody for a criminal crime that is involved with DCYF in a court case. That is upheld by Melissa M. 127-710 in New Hampshire Supreme Court from 1986, where they ruled that use immunity for individuals involved with DCYF are immune from criminal liability.
Could you give us that citation again, please?
I can. Melissa M. 127, New Hampshire 710. Yep, not a problem. So again, these are some of these issues that are going on, is where you have that use immunity involved, but then you have DCYF, CASA, and unfortunately even a child's attorney at this current time trying to procure criminal charges for a parent that's involved with DCYF. I'm not going to get into too much specifics, but this case has been going on for 4 years now, and some of these members have heard recently that the child has been asking to appear in court for 3 years now, with DCYF and CASA refusing the child to appear. And that's a due process violation of the child's rights. The child has every right. The child is now 14 years of age.
You can take a second.
And we have every party denying this child from having the voice that they deserve. And I understand that I'm, potentially the accused party. I'm not the only party of this case. There's multiple parties. There's 10 children involved. Only one of them is my own. which you can see the gravity of the situation based on that. Sorry. Yeah, so we have this situation where we're denying these children's rights to their voice in their day in court when they're requesting their day in court. And I understand, obviously, yes, it's hard. Nobody's saying that it's easy to have that child come into court and hear what's being said, the gruesome acts that are going on to multiple children, not biologic to myself, that are biologic to the child. But it's something that, had we have followed the policies and procedures from day one, none of this would have happened. We're sitting on an issue where the Attorney General stepped in November and indeed alleged that, well, confirmed the allegations presented by multiple parties that DCYF was perjuring themselves with regards to fitness and some other issues against DCYF. DCYF has not been factual in nature the entirety of the caseload, and it has presented serious harm to multiple children. With an episode of in last year, which I testified before the Family and Child Law Committee about this earlier this year, that there was an episode last summer where some of these children were exposed to adult sexual activity with the child present in the bed, and DCYF still left that child inside that home. So these are some of the outrageous issues, and these are not exclusive to my family. These are not exclusive to any one family. I can't give that information, obviously, because I'm not at liberty to go ahead and, inflict potential retaliation against other families, but we have multiple families that are presenting similar to the Dennis Vaughn Jr. case, where parents are making these reports of concerns against these workers not following laws and procedures, and it's turning out to be detrimental to these children. I think that's where I'll leave that for today. As many of you know, that I'll be back around soon enough.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that you've been through this process. I'm not sure if there's any questions, but thank you. And you actually were exactly 7 minutes. I paused it for 30 seconds while I was giving you time to compose yourself. I don't think anybody can do that.
Yeah.
But thank you, and hopefully we can find any gaps in policies and procedures, because we need to have standards so that things can be done correctly. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, I'd like to call Shelby Boyce. You'd said 10 minutes at least. So you probably missed it when we first were introducing this. We just need to make sure that what we have is something that we can manage with what you have. If it gets to go too long, it's harder for us to get the value of everything you're saying, and we might lose something important that you've shared with us. So I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. I'll let you just wrap up at that point. But if you can try and keep just to the details that we need and not share anything that's too personal that you don't want to have on this recorded testimony with YouTube. So with that, thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak. I haven't really had a voice for the past 5 years. I've been dealing with DCYF and actually a lot of people, and I don't really know how to sum this up, and I'm kind of just winging it. I have 4 disabled children, and a felon was pushed into my life where I started a relationship, and we moved to Laconia, and when we got there, abuse started happening pretty bad. And it wasn't just abuse from the partner that I was with, it was the cops, the school abusing my son, locking him in the huts. He's nonverbal. A lot of traumatic things started happening. My daughter, got abused by his son, and they didn't have enough information, apparently. And, off that goes. They accused my ex-husband of touching my children and then tried to put my kids with him. In fact, they did for a brief moment. There's a there's too much in my case that I don't know how to focus on one thing because nobody's listened. It's absolutely disgusting that you accuse a man of touching his children, then you never investigate him. He flees to Texas, then he comes back, and now you're trying to reunify my children with him because I'm in an abusive relationship over one report. There's a lot of proof in this case, and everything that I had, they literally just took it away. They made me lose my apartment by taking my partner and giving him a 30-day setback over one incident that they didn't have really any proof of. They didn't give him a chance to do anything. They just came in with no contacts on everything. The DCYF worker came and brought me boxes every day in court that we were there. I would cry my eyes out and I'm like, you take my partner away and I'm going to be homeless. I can't get my kids back if I'm homeless. I'm just a single mom, basically, of 4 disabled children living off of $1,500 a month. They gave him, I know I'm kind of all over the place because it's hard for me. I've been through some serious trauma in the situation between all of these people. I've been sex trafficked. I have dealt with horrendous things since losing my apartment. And I don't know how to say it to anybody, but nobody has listened this whole time. DCYF just makes false reports. It's absolutely disgusting. They hide the facts. The day I moved in, there was them telling me that I couldn't let my ex-husband around the kids, and to change the order at the court. And, I did what they told me to do. And I can't even think right now. I'm like, sorry. I'm sorry.
Is
I
it the
can't.
lack? Sorry, if you take a breath.
I can't. I didn't. This was kind of like a last minute thing, and I'm not good at speaking, and I don't know what I'm supposed to say and not say. And
If
I
you could pause for
basically
just 1 second. It seems to me that it's a
I'm scattered.
it's a lack of consistency. Would you say that it's a lack of consistency from them?
lack of consistency. They literally
them.
build up cases that just don't make any sense, and there's so much chaos. And they give you a partial discovery of, a banker's box, and it's all scattered. It's not even in order. Things are missing. They don't take any evidence from you. You have everything, and they just hide it all. It's too many people involved. There's too much abuse going on, and
Thank you.
I don't know
sorry.
how to deal with this. This is disgusting what they're doing to families. They have traumatized my kids. They put them in VPI. They put them in National Children's Home. They've been bouncing them all around. They put things in their head. Now my daughter thinks she's a boy, and my nonverbal sons at Easter Seals, like permanently, like they separated at all of us and just abused us in so many ways. And I have so much trauma, and my brain doesn't work right from it.
You're doing a amazing
I'm
job
not.
getting. No, you
Really.
are. You've been through a really, really difficult
10 minutes is
situation.
not enough time
And-
to sit there and explain everything that's happened in years.
Is it all right if we just ask you a couple of these questions, just so that this can be focused a little to help you out? We're trying to help you by asking
Yeah,
you this.
I understand.
Okay, Representative Weber, you had a question.
I just had a clarifying question so I would understand what you said already. And if this is inappropriate or tough for you,
You can ask.
it's fine not to answer.
Okay.
At one point, you used the word partner, and at one point, you used the word husband. Am I thinking that the husband is an ex-husband and the partner is your current partner?
I have
And
an ex-husband.
if that's difficult,
I have an ex-husband, and then I had divorced him. He was abusive, and this guy from Concord prison was pushed on me.
So different people.
And I'm not with this person. It's been 2 years now.
okay.
That person introduced me to drugs. I was being drugged. I was being psychologically just tormented by him, by everybody in Laconia. And I was just being messed with the whole time.
And I'm so sorry, and I don't want you to go deeper into anything you don't want to go into.
I don't mind going
just
into
needed-
anything. I'm just afraid. I don't know what I'm supposed to say or not say because I've been told that I need to basically be quiet. I've been threatened. My life has been threatened severely this whole time. And then they didn't understand why I wouldn't leave my partner and get help. And they weren't helping me, and I was scared. I mean, I was literally being drugged. I would wake up with needle marks in my arms. I'm petrified of needles. I don't do
So,
that.
Um,
Nobody listens.
So if I can just interrupt you now, you have shared so much with us.
There's a
and I'm
lot.
so
There's
sorry
a
with
lot.
everything you've gone through.
How do you come at somebody? They came at me because of my spiritual beliefs, because I had a near-death experience that was really, really traumatic. And they forced me to go and have an emergency mental health evaluation without a warrant, would not leave my house, and if I didn't go do it, waive my HIPAA and tell them everything about this spiritual awakening that was mocked, that they were going to take my kids from school.
Then
They've done so many things that's not even funny.
You're so brave for coming and sharing this with us. If I can, I'm just going to ask that it probably makes sense to end what you're saying now, but I'd love to talk with you more. It's so hard to come and talk in front of people like this.
Yeah, it is.
And you're doing an amazing job. I know we all feel for you with what you've gone through with this.
I don't think any of you could ever feel what we go through. I don't believe that for a second. You cannot feel somebody else's pain unless you have walked down that path yourself. That is a fact. And you have these workers who are not trained, who are young, who have no life experience, no children, don't have a clue about anything. Their perception is so not there. Their bias, their stigma, there's so much, and they don't listen to a damn thing you say. They just abuse you more. If you say your rights, if you say what's the truth, you just get abused.
No, thank you. There's people on here that have had life experiences that give them a
I'm
lot
sure
of
there
compassion
is.
to you.
But I don't think it would be going on if you guys really knew. I don't know how you can let it happen.
That's why we're here.
Thank you. We're here to try and stop that from happening. But thank you. Oh, sorry, Representative Love, you have a question for
Yes,
her?
what was your name again?
Shelby.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Hold on. I'm going to just take a 5-minute recess real quick. Um, Thank you for that indulgence. I'm going to open this meeting back up again. This is such an emotional topic, and it's so important that we just wanted to make sure that we're able to just make sure that people understand just how much the testimony means to us. With that, I will call Mr. Joseph Noon up to speak, and I'll let you know when you're at 10 minutes, because if you're able to get us down into something that we can process at this one, I know that you'll be back in other ones as well. I
Yeah,
would
if you
expect
could
that.
let me know at the
Thank
10 minutes and then give me a 2-minute wrap up, that'd be wonderful.
I will. Thank you.
I, Joseph Noon, do solemnly swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. This is really hard to wrap up in 10 minutes. I'm going to kind of just go off the cuff here. Back in March of 2022, my wife went to run some errands and allowed our then 2-year-old daughter, who had just fallen asleep after being at a playground in Concord, to ride her bike, because there was no bike riding in Henniker where we live because it was March. She allowed our daughter to take a nap while she ran into a store to make a quick return. Came back about 20 minutes later, and there was police outside her car. They had a little talk. There was no citations issued, and my wife went home. A few days later, we get a call from Melissa Coombs, social worker at DCYF. Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm from the state. I said, Melissa, I reject your offer to contract with me. And then I promptly sent a cease and desist order with a fee schedule to the director of DCYF at that time, Joseph Risbaum. And in that cease and desist, I put all of the reasons, or not all, but some of the reasons why I rejected DCYF's offer to contract with me. These guys are offering to contract with people, and they're using, quite literally, threats of violence, threats of getting the police and courts involved. They're calling family court a court. It's not a court. It's a legislative tribunal. It wasn't created by the judiciary. It doesn't exercise due process of law. So they're using all of these elements and weapons quite regularly to sort of threaten and coerce people into contracting with them by accepting their services, by accepting their offers. And they don't even know what's happening because, well, let's be blunt here. America has been really dumbed down. The entire Western world has been dumbed down. The vocabulary of somebody 100 years ago that was on this dirt here in New Hampshire was much greater. The intelligence was much greater 100 years ago for the average whoever than it is today. So people don't even know what's going on, and they're being deceived. I also, in my cease and desist order, which I'm going to give a copy to you guys, I just did a real simple thing. You guys want to see how horrible New Hampshire DCYF is? Follow the money. Do an internet search, NHDCYF settlements. And I hope you have a strong stomach, because you can't even go through all the articles if you love children and care about our posterity without, just being brought to tears or being made sick when you start reading about the settlements. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid out just in New Hampshire alone to settle cases against DCYF time and time and time again. Now, I don't know if you guys, I'm going to read a little bit from my affidavit here that was permitted to this, that was submitted to this committee. The social workers are lying all the time. Yeah, they sign these affidavits under oath of penalty and perjury and put lies right into them. Oh, another thing is I did a right to know request for the oath of office of the director of DCYF, for the oath of office of Melissa Coombs, a social worker. I got a letter back that said, I'll find it here in a second, that they don't have any oaths of office. There is no oath to the Constitution. How are these people even supposed to understand what due process is if they have no oath of office? The police officers have an oath of office. The Henniker PD, I asked them for their oath of office for all their officers, and they give it to me. It's there, it exists. I get a denial. I also asked them about their bonding information. All government agents, all governmental agents, all municipal corporate employees, DCYF actually is probably not even part of the government, best I can tell. It's a mere municipal corporation. That's all it is. And you guys, or the legislature funds it. The legislature makes it exist. Because you guys fund it, because it exists by the legislature, and I don't mean just you individuals in this room, but the legislature in general, you have the ability to look at every single document, all of the funding, all these sealed cases should be able to be unsealed and looked into by the legislature. Maybe you guys haven't figured out how to do that, but if you control them and you allow them exist, the legislature gave them life. The legislature can take it all away from DCYF, I believe, and that should be happening. So in an affidavit, which is from this motion to enter, which is what the social workers, the first pleading that they give to family court, Melissa Coombs, social worker, lied under oath in an affidavit of order to enter premise. She writes that CPSW, Melissa Coombs, made contact with Henniker Police Department, who stated they are familiar with the family due to the residents being free staters, anti-government, and the family lives on a compound with lookouts. Henniker Police states it's a dangerous situation and will not go to the home without a court order. This is paragraph 8 of the right to enter that was filed and submitted and signed under oath of office. Signed under oath and perjury. Henniker Police rebut the claim affirmed by Melissa Coombs. In the police officer's narrative and in an affidavit, he writes, no one calls for using the term anti-government lookouts dangerous or compound. Also, social worker Melissa Coombs ascribes various negative opinions about my family, property, community, and lifestyle in an attempt to engender fear amongst the family court and local law enforcement, and has caused irreparable harm to my reputation and has caused trespass on my property and has also caused me hundreds of hours of time. And I have young children right now that are 2 and 4 years old. And if you're parents, you understand that the most valuable time in your child's life is within that first 6-year window to spend the maximum amount of time you can with them. So another thing that these guys started to talk about, other people in committee here testifying, that there's this financial incentive for DCYF and family court to get money from the federal government, Social Security Administration, Title IV. So there is a Granite State College, as part of the Child Welfare Education Partnership, offers a class titled DCYF Revenue Enhancements and RMS that is available to social workers to maximize revenue for DCYF. Here's a quote. This workshop, right from their website, this workshop will provide crucial information regarding the various federal funding sources and how to access these sources in order to provide services to children and families. Staff will learn about various federal funding sources to Title 4A, Title 4E, and Medicaid for both services and administration. Document requirements for accessing federal funds will be discussed. They're literally hunting for this federal fund money. So this assessment where she lies and says that, I'm dangerous and, I'm anti-government and that the police said it, which the police never said, is a whole other issue. In this document, it orders that the police or a child service worker may enter the premises and interview a 2-year-old child alone. Well, if you internet search New Hampshire DCYF settlements, you would be a fool to allow DCYF to enter your house and or interview your child alone. So that being said, says the police officer shall do it. I went ahead with the local Henniker chief of police and I said, hey, you guys, Matt French is his name. I said, Matt, you and your Lieutenant Michelle, who happens to be a former social worker and who is also trained in child sex crimes and things like that, but she's a mom. That's what's important to me. She's a family woman. Matt French, who is a family man, a father, and they're both still with their significant others, the fathers of their children. I said, you guys can do this assessment. That's fine. They said, great. When he emailed back to the lawyers at DCYF, hey, the Noons have agreed to, police conducting this assessment. They said, no, you can't do that, even though the order says it. Also, Matt French reported very soon, right after he met me, when he reached out to me contacted me to meet with him. The very first moment I had available to meet with him, I said, "We're going down to the Pancake House. Come meet us there." So me, my wife, and my two kids went to the Pancake House to meet Matt French, and we chatted for an hour and a half. And at that day, he reported, I believe that was March 29th, he reported to DCYF that there was no neglect or abuse and that the children are fine. After that, Matt French came to my property multiple times, no less than a dozen times within the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 10 to 12 weeks, actually. It's a wide period. He came to my property very often. And he talked to me about DCYF, all kinds of things. I have a whole narrative from him. I have an affidavit he filed. So
We're at the 10 if you want to wrap up for us.
DCYF, after being told that there's no abuse or neglect, after being told that the Henniker police could do the assessment order, rejected all of that. They said that the police were incompetent. They weren't able to do this. And then they escalated and they went forth, and Ross McLeod submitted a motion to a contempt motion against my wife and I in family court. I have here a verified expedited motion to correct a record and change the court order based on prior material misrepresentation that you guys should absolutely read. These are the words of the Henniker Chief of Police. That motion was vacated. And here's the thing with the assessment order, it orders the police or a social worker to do something. It doesn't order a parent to do anything. Ross McLeod is very aware of this. J.R. Hull, a representative in this house, made Ross McLeod very aware of this with his attorney in filings a year before they did this with me. And so Ross McLeod is just submitting garbage, essentially maladministration and fraud to these family courts by submitting contempt motions when the contemptor is not even named in an order. And we had Henniker police on board to do this. And the reason DCYF, as far as I'm concerned, and best I can tell, did not want Henniker police doing the assessment is because DCYF gets paid out of this Title IV program to do these assessments. Each time they do an assessment, I heard the number is like $6,000 to do an assessment. You guys should really look into this program to maximize revenue for DCYF, to understand what the social workers are being taught on how to maximize revenue. This is a textbook definition of child trafficking. Trafficking means buying, selling, or trading, transporting for hire. And we all know what children are. They're these little babies that we love. And there's demonic forces out there that want to harvest their energy. It's been a tale that's been going on for thousands of years. Books and movies are written about this. So I'll be back. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to organize some papers for you guys to read. And I really want you to do something about it, because if good men do nothing, evil will prevail. And if nonviolent means do not work, society breaks down to violence. And we don't want to go there.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Oh, yes, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What was the school offering that course?
Granite State College,
Granite State College.
as part of Child Welfare Education Partnership. And the title of the course is, the quote is DCYF Revenue Enhancement and RMS. Be sure to check out RMS. That's a whole federal program to give money.
Representative Kofod and then Representative Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So at one point in your testimony, you said that motion was vacated.
Yes.
I just want to be clear, was that the motion for contempt, or was that the motion that you filed in response to the?
I didn't file any motion.
Okay,
This is the motion for contempt was vacated by the Henniker Police Department.
Okay.
Or was vacated by family court, and it was filed by the Henniker Police Department. I'm going to give that for you guys to read.
So the Henniker Police Department filed the motion to vacate
The contempt order,
contempt
yes.
order. Got it. Thank you.
Representative Love.
Can you clarify who is Ross McLeod?
Ross McLeod is a attorney for New Hampshire DCYF. And he is actually paid out of, I believe, the judicial budgeting. He's not paid out of DCYF or Health and Human Services. He's also a Board of Selectmen at Wyndham.
Sorry, other questions? I have one. It sounded, you said that there was discrepancies between what the caseworker wrote down the police saying and what the police said that they did. Do you know if those were verbal communications or written communications?
I have no idea between the police department, basically in the document, which that particular document, I forgot to bring the assessment order. I have it on the computer here, but it basically says Henniker Police States is what the document says. I haven't got any, but I can tell you, Matt French was very upset that that language was in there.
Thank you. That's helpful. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much for your testimony, and narrowing it down to that time really helped us focus on the issues. So thank you. And I just wanted to see if anybody else wanted to speak. I don't have any other pink cards. So with that, I will close our meeting of the special committee of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And I thank everybody for their time. I thank everybody for their testimony. And I'm looking forward to us working to figure out those policies and procedures and seeing if there are breakdowns, because the testimony suggests that there may be, and perhaps we can fix that and find some solutions for the families and children of our state. Thank you.
Who should I give this to?
We'll get it on the calendar when we do that. It'll be a Monday. I'm not sure. It probably shouldn't be Eclipse Monday. We'll see if we can schedule one next week, or if it would make sense to do it after the eclipse. Probably after the eclipse. Perfect. So we will do it the month.
Might give us time to get people who need to come.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. Yes.
The 8th is the eclipse day.
Yeah.
The 15th, Pat and I are on the DCYF advisory board, so we have a meeting that day.
Okay, so we can try and schedule it around that time frame.
So it's like April is so just so you know.
It's gonna be tough.
When you plan.
Everybody on the committee, can you tell me what Mondays work for you so that we can figure out how to best thread this meeting?